share my screen. Is that all okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So thanks for that lovely introduction, Bhavna. Yes, I'm an optometrist at Moorfields Eye Hospital. I work mostly in our low vision clinics, and I also work at the UCL Institute of Ophthalmology as a researcher in visual function. So my interest is mostly in function and visual impairment and what can be helpful functionally for people who are visually impaired. Today I'm going to talk about technology, as Bhavna's particularly asked for that. And that's fantastic. But I would say that I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a really top world-renowned expert on technology. What I would say is a lot of what I've learned about technology has actually come from my time spent with people with visual impairment. And I'll often learn a lot from people who are, day-to-day users of this technology. So what I was thinking to do today is give a kind of broad overview across a few topics where technology comes into its own. And then hopefully that can facilitate some further conversations with you guys in your breakout sessions, because I reckon that a lot of people will have used at least some of what I'm about to talk about. And hearing, firsthand user experience is probably more useful than listening to me talk about it as someone who doesn't use it in a day-to-day sense. So the areas that I would like to talk about, let's see if I can control this, are electronic magnification, first of all, then some bits about smartphones and tablets, then we'll talk about some speech and audio output options, some applications, and then some of these wearable electronic devices that there seems to be a lot of interest in at the moment. So let's talk about electronic magnification first of all. So essentially, in the simplest terms, what I mean here is taking a digital image and magnifying that. And electronic magnification tends to have some big advantages over optical devices. By optical, I mean simple magnifiers. So they would tend to have a larger field of view. They'll also have variable magnification as opposed to a set level of magnification through an optical lens. And they'll have contrast and color changing options, which can be very helpful. And they'll come in a range of different types of devices. So we'll get portable devices, which would have a smaller screen and typically a smaller range of magnification options. And that will be more useful on the go, as opposed to desktop devices that would be more in an office setting or in a home setting with a larger screen with a higher range of magnification. And these portable and desktop devices tend to be used more for viewing things at a close range, so reading, for drawing, for looking at images, for handwriting, but you can get some that have distance-focused cameras as well, so that you can extend the functionality to look in the distance. And some of the newer devices also can be connected into second screens, so you can connect it through to your television or a larger screen to give you that sort of wider area to work within. And then, as I mentioned, there are these wearable types of electronic devices that we'll talk about a bit later on. So other than these standalone devices for electronic magnification, of course, many people use magnification on their computers, on their laptops, by using on-screen or zoom magnification that you would usually find within the accessibility features of a given device. And then if that's not sufficient, there are dedicated software programs that can be downloaded to extend the functionality of that magnification and color and contrast options. These would be software options such as Zoom Text, for instance. So moving on a little bit to smartphones and tablets, because actually a lot of the functionality of electronic magnifying devices is already found on some of these smartphones and tablets. And I would say that certainly within the younger patients that I see, a lot of people will just gravitate to these devices because, they've probably already got one. They're more portable, they're less obtrusive. And because they've got a camera inbuilt, you've got that option to take an image and magnify. And outside of just the camera feature, there's usually within the accessibility features a dedicated magnifying setting that would usually give a larger range of magnification and some of these color and contrast options that you can get from an electronic device. So these tend to be used, I would say, a lot more for younger people rather than buying separate electronic magnifying systems. And of course, because you've got the camera, you can magnify something that's not on your screen. And because you've got accessibility features, you can magnify things that are on your screen. And you've also got a range of other features for changing font sizes, changing fonts as well, changing brightness, changing contrast. And if you're a user who uses their vision more to access information, a larger screen is often beneficial because then you can extend your magnification and keep more on your screen at one time. If you're someone who likes to use some audio options as well, you've got a lot of these inbuilt into many of the newer phones and tablets. You've got these speak selection options within the accessibility features, and you've also got dedicated screen readers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You've also got features that really weren't developed thinking specifically about visual impairment. They're just things that happen to be very helpful for everybody. So we've got our voice assistants, like these things like Siri. You can dictate to some of the devices rather than type, although it can be tricky. I know when I try, it doesn't like my accent, and sometimes it will pick up the odd thing incorrectly. And then, of course, you can put your electronic books or your audio books on there. And my personal favorite is podcasts. There's so much great audio content to listen to in a wide range of topics. And I'd say that's one of my favorite things over lockdown this last year. Now, of course, you've also got the opportunity to download additional applications to extend the functionality of your device. And here are a few apps that I'll talk about later, some that you may know, some that you may not. So things like Cnai, Google Lookout, Louis Voice Control, and Lazarillo, and we'll go through these later on when we get to our applications part. But before we get there, let's circle back to this idea of audio output. So some people will use audio exclusively, and some people will use audio as a kind of adjunct to the strategies of magnification or any other strategies that they use. And what I wanted to mention is that, you can think of it very flexibly. You can opt in and you can opt out of audio as you require. So when I mention audio to some patients, I occasionally will get the sort of sense that I don't think my vision is such that I need to listen. I think I'd rather use my vision. And all I'm saying is just, explore and look at how these features might be helpful. So for instance, I personally use audio for proofreading. So when I write a document and I want to proofread it, rather than try and do that visually, where I might just glance over mistakes that I've made, I will listen and I can hear my mistakes much quicker than I will see them sometimes. So audio might not necessarily just have to be used from the point of view of getting around a visual impairment, but it's, think of it as a different way of accessing information. And it might also be useful in other areas, such as if you've just got a very long piece of reading to do, if you're having a bad day with your eyes, if it's very bright or the light conditions aren't favorable, or if you just want really quick access to something. So I would just keep a little bit of an open mind as to how some of these features could be employed. So as we said, there are these screen reading features that are on tablets and on computers currently. For Apple devices, there's a feature called Voiceover, which many of you may be aware of. In Android, a similar feature is called TalkBack. And then even Windows has this system called Windows Narrator. Now, when I talk to people who use screen readers more sort of exclusively, it tends to be that Voiceover wins. It seems like that is the sort of preferred option. However, in recent years or recent months even, I've heard a lot of more positive things about TalkBack, the Android version. Windows Narrator for a long time had a very, very bad rap. People thought it really was very clunky and it didn't work well. But again, Microsoft have really invested in that over the last period, and that has come on, so I'm made aware. Now, before we had everyone join us, I was trying to show Bhavna that I've included a few videos into the presentation that explain some of these things. And I'm going to try and show some. It just might be a little bit clunky whilst I switch the screens that I'm going to share. So just bear with me for one moment whilst I try and bring up our first video. And this will be on screen reading software. Let's see.
How to use a screen reader on your phone. Using a screen reader to navigate a device can be useful to anyone who's visually impaired. Here's how to use this feature on your iPhone or Android handset. Screen reader is called Voiceover. To access this, go to Settings, General, then Accessibility. Voiceover is the first option on the list, but we'd recommend you scroll and select Accessibility Shortcut. Make sure there's a tick next to Voiceover. Triple-click the Home button to use this shortcut to turn on Voiceover.
Voiceover on.
Then you can navigate around the screen by swiping left or right.
Calendar. Photos. Calendar.
Voiceover will alert you to the app you've selected, and you can double-tap anywhere on the screen to open an app. Voiceover can be switched off again by triple-clicking the Home button. You can also adjust Voiceover settings, like the volume, using a gesture called rotor. Twist your thumb and forefinger on the screen as if you were turning an imaginary dial.
Speaking rate.
Twist multiple times until you reach the setting you want. You can then adjust the setting by flicking upwards or downwards.
60%.
Most Android smartphones also have a screen reader feature. Each Android device might be slightly different, but here we're using a Samsung A5. Go to Apps, Settings, Accessibility, then Vision. Select Voice Assistant and turn it on.
Voice Assistant on. Home screen, page 1 of 3 to 4 page.
Swipe left and right to navigate and double tap to select.
Apps button, double tap to open app tray.
You can adjust VoiceOver settings by doing a 3-finger swipe from left to right. Once you've found the setting you're after, you can swipe up and down to make changes.
Speech rate 40%, 45%, 50%.
Screen readers are a useful feature, but they may take a bit of time to get used to. That's an introduction to using screen readers on your iPhone or Android device.
Lovely. Did that work okay? Did that come over okay?
Yeah, that was clear. I hear it clearly.
So as the video kind of suggested, it's not something that a person will pick up and use straight away.
The growth of online digital agencies are climbing to an all-time high. In 20...
1 second. Sorry about that. So yes, as the video illustrated, it's not something that a person will use straight away very easily. There's definitely a learning curve with this. And a lot of it involves learning particular gestures and particular kind of commands to be able to get the most out of the individual screen reader. Now, if you think about more a desktop computer situation, you've got dedicated software that can be downloaded onto your computer. Now, I've mentioned two quite popular ones here. So JAWS Access with Speech. This would be primarily used, or at least the screen reader used most in industry for employment. And then there's NVDA, or non-visual desktop access, which is a freely available open access screen reader that can be downloaded from NV Access website. And the electronic magnifier systems that we talked about, these electronic software programs, some of them will also include screen reading software as well, such as Supernova. Now, again, definitely there's a learning process, but one new thing that's occurred very recently that I hope sort of indicates where the direction of this may go is that in the very recent version of JAWS, they've actually developed a voice assistant called Sharky. So much like you've got your Siri or Bixby on your telephone, on your mobile phone, Sharky is a voice assistant that you can use along with the most recent version of JAWS. And so what that means is that rather than having to learn your commands on your keyboard, it can work off of voice commands. And you can also ask it to remind you of certain keyboard shortcuts that you might need to use with the type of, with the software. So just thinking about keyboards a little bit, to interact with programs such as JAWS or NVDA or any equivalents, being able to navigate your keyboard is a really fundamental skill in being able to get the most out of the technology, because it relies on these keyboard commands and shortcuts. So a bit like when you have to learn, Control S to save or Control C to copy, all the different functions that you may need can be controlled by these types of shortcuts. So another thing to think about if you're interested in using that type of technology is to consider to learn to touch type, which many of you may have done over the years. And by this, I just mean being able to type without needing visual access to the computer. If that sounds a bit too much, then obviously always is the option of using modified keyboards with larger or modified keys. And then audio also comes in when you want to think about access audibly to content on paper or on objects using optical character recognition. So there's a range of different ways to do this as well. Some of the newer electronic magnifying systems that I talked about earlier have embedded OCR or optical character recognition technology so that you can flip between looking visually and magnifying to using the audio output instead and having that content read to you. There are also some text-to-speech scanners that people use sometimes. I'd say these are used a bit less frequently now. So these are devices, again, with a camera that images the content that you want read, and then the text within that image is turned into an audio output. And then there's another device which is in the sort of realm of these wearable devices called an OrCam. And this is a small camera. It's about the size of a USB key, and it fixes magnetically to the side of a pair of glasses. And by turning your head, moving your head, you can direct the camera to the direction that you want. And then using some gestures, either that it can recognize through the camera, such as putting your hand up or pointing, or tapping the side of the device, it will take an image and then read the content of that image to you. Now, you may also know that there are some applications that do very similar types of, have very similar types of functions. And I'm going to move on to that next, but keep in mind that some of the things I'm about to talk about are also applicable to this OrCam device as well. So with the applications, I want to first talk about these artificial intelligence applications. So Microsoft Seeing AI and Google Outlook, these have been around for a while. I think Seeing AI came along first of all. Both of these applications are free to download. Microsoft Seeing AI is only available on Apple, whereas the Google Outlook is the Android version. So these are applications that use artificial intelligence to try to decode an image, whether that be text or whether that be an object. So they'll have, between these two applications, they've got some shared features, and we'll talk about those first. And just remember that, again, these are common to this OrCam device as well. So within the applications, they've got a range of different channels, and there are different channels for different tasks, essentially. So these are a short text or text mode channel, a document mode, a currency mode, a product or food label mode, and a scene or explore mode. And the different names just relate to the different applications. So the first mode, this short text or text mode, I think of it as kind of like a live option. So when you open the app, it will open the camera automatically, and it opens in this mode, the short text mode. And as soon as the app recognizes that there's some text in the image that it can see through the camera, it will start to try and read that aloud. If you then move the camera and more text or new text is in the image, it will then start to read that as well. So that's why it tends to be better for smaller focused pieces of text rather than a whole document, as you would have to hold it very, very still to try and decode that whole document. And that's why you've got a different channel for documents. So this allows you to take an image of the document and have it all scanned at once and then be turned into audio. Currency does similar things. It tries to tell you what the what denomination is your paper currency. I don't think it works on coins. And for products and food labels, it's reading those, often using the barcode. And for Scene and Explore, as I said, it's trying to explain the content of an image that you give the device. Now, the Seeing AI app also has some additional features. It has a person mode, so you can actually give it images and label them of who these people are, and it will tell you if they're in the image, or it will try to describe a person if it doesn't know who that person is in terms of the sex, the age, and the expression that that person is making. It can be used on handwriting, but it's going to be more accurate for obviously neater handwriting than sort of my scrawly handwriting. It can recognize colors and it can detect light. And then another feature that has come on quite recently, which is only available at the moment, I think in the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Max, is using Lidar technology. So this is light detecting and ranging technology. And what it tries to do is is to show or to explain the depth in images as well. Now, I have another video for that. It's a few minutes long. It's actually of a young lady who is a journalist with the BBC, and she is trying out this technology for the first time. So if you bear with my clunky computer skills again, I'm going to bring up that video now as well.
If you're blind like me, tech that describes its surroundings can be life-changing.
Facing southwest along World Piazza.
Not that it always gets it right.
Is there bike parking in front of us?
That was last year. Now, the new iPhone 12 comes with LiDAR to help users detect people around them.
That's especially useful right now when we're all meant to be socially distancing.
I asked my best friend Dave to help me give it a go.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Nice to see you.
In these strange times, I have felt a bit anxious about leaving the house.
Have you tried it out the house yet, or is this the first time?
This is the first ever time. The world outside is so inaccessible at the moment for me. I don't know if people are going to cough in my face or where they are in proximity to me. But will this in my hand have the answer? There's no people detected, so I'm guessing that's correct.
As we set off down my local high street, we saw the tool could be amazingly accurate.
A white building with a red and white sign on it. Person wearing a helmet sitting on a motorcycle.
Then again, it did also think that Dave was a child. Hilarious.
Child standing in front of a building with a cycle.
What does that just say? Did I just say a child in front? I get that a lot.
It is telling me in front of a building though,
I mean,
babe.
that's accurate.
But what really surprised me was the people proximity alerts.
Oh, there's two people. Yeah, there's two people. Yeah, got them.
It's almost getting almost every person that's walking past.
I love it. There's a person 1.5 meters away from me. Do I need to socially distance?
The smartphone counts down as people get closer.
I found you. You're 5 meters away.
I am.
4 meters away. 2.
We're here.
1.5.
And your cane is about to... There we go.
0.5. Thank goodness you're in my bubble, babe.
I think this is going to be useful even after the pandemic for tackling things like queues.
Right, you're there. A person standing on a sidewalk in front of a store. That is incredible. 2 meters away. I'm 2 meters away. Oh, there's a person. Honestly, I think knowing that people are around me freaks me out a little bit because I'm really not used to knowing where people are. So I'm going to have to get used to it. But I'm really excited that I can be in control again.
But any AI tool can only ever be as good as its training data.
And objects like braille readers or white canes have never been the focus of an AI database before, until now.
These clips have been collected by Microsoft, City University of London and the University of Oxford. But they've all been filmed by people like Robin.
It's really important that blind people themselves are the ones to do the recording of the things that are important to them, that they're the ones that are capturing these training videos because they're the people that are going to be using the software to find the objects.
So far, some 3,000 videos have already been collected, and the project aims to gather around 10,000 clips in total.
Because this AI can learn from just a handful of clips, users will be able to teach it personalised objects. That means being able to pick out your keys or your cane from other people's.
So just imagine if I could train it to say, yeah, Robin's shoes, or those are Robin's glasses, particularly when you've got family members leaving their stuff around as well. You know, is this my mug that I'm about to pick up, or is it somebody else's?
Wow, that sounds amazing. I use apps every single day, but I've never seen something that will personalize objects in my hand before, and this will be groundbreaking for the visually impaired community.
All right, let me just close that window in case it pops up again for us. Right, so I hope that that described it better, probably better than I could have, to be honest. Let's think about some other applications now. So a new one that I've only recently heard of is called Louis Voice Control. And this has been developed in India, I believe, and it is for Android only. This is a voice assistant to be used with Android devices. So a bit like your Siri, which you can use to say, you know, open Uber. But if you wanted to then book that Uber, it's quite difficult for it to go through all the different steps within each application. So Louis Voice Control is an application that's been developed to do that. And again, I'm going to show you a little video about this because I think it just gives you the proper information. This is a video by the developer of the application. He's very, very enthusiastic about it, but I think it just gives you a proper feel for what this has the potential to do.
Hey, Louis, forward 37 seconds.
Forwarding.
Comment.
Your comment.
Hey, this is a great one.
Comment added.
Hey, I'm Pramit. I'm the founder of Louis Voice Control. Louis allows users to completely control apps with just voice commands. As a visually impaired, there was a phase in life when my vision was dropping drastically. I was lost. And then a turnaround happened. A sighted friend was helping me book Uber. He kept asking me questions and I kept giving the selections. And voila, the booking was done. And this got me thinking. This was a eureka moment. What if I could, right on this phone screen, build a virtual friend, exactly like my friend who was helping me book an Uber. And thus, Louis was born. Hey, Louis.
Hello, Pramit. Good to see you. Which app would you like to use?
Uber.
Say or spell destination.
Park Plaza.
Park Plaza Gurugram. Would you like to select this location?
Yes.
Let's select a ride. Moto, 152 rupees.
Uber Go.
Uber Go, 2, 104 rupees.
Select.
Your pickup location is Hotel Radisson. Your destination is Park Plaza Gurugram. Payment method, test payment. Good to go with. Uber Go.
Confirm.
Your booking is confirmed. Your driver is 8 minutes away. Driver profile, 5.0 star rating, white Chevrolet Aveo. Call or message driver.
Message.
Speak your message.
I'm wearing a blue shirt.
Got it.
Send.
Message sent.
You must be wondering, how is Louis different from voice assistants? Alexa, Google, Siri. Well, there is just no comparison. Voice assistants tend to be just too superficial. They will only do 2 or 3 things within an app. And they have the nasty habit of going silent. Or in comparison, Louis will allow you to completely, inside out, control apps with just voice commands. And Louis does so in a continuous, two-way human interaction, something that every human needs. It can now voice control YouTube, Uber, WhatsApp, contacts, and phone calling. And many more apps are on the way.
Help us spread the word. The app can be downloaded from Google Play Store.
Oops, I'm just going to try and turn that off again. So as you can see on that app, it's quite new and it's only started to interact with certain other third-party apps. And I imagine that that list will grow over time. So it would be quite a useful one to keep an eye on. I believe it's free to download at the moment, but when I've listened to the developers talk about it, I think there is probably a payment sort of model being developed out of it in the future. So it might be useful to try and get on board early if that looks interesting. So another couple of apps to talk about are these live virtual assistants applications. Be My Eyes is one that's been around for a number of years, and it's free to download, free to use, and available on Apple and Android. And then there's a more sophisticated option called Aira, which is a free download but a subscription service. Essentially, what these applications do is they put you in a video call contact with either a volunteer, if it's Be My Eyes, or with a trained professional, if it's Aira. But Be My Eyes is free, and I feel like it's a really useful app to at least have a little look at. As I say, you are linked to an untrained volunteer. I personally am a volunteer, and I've been a volunteer for a number of years, and I have literally got one call. So I think the number of volunteers greatly outweighs the number of visually impaired users. So in the call that I had, it was a gentleman who got a new TV, and he just wanted me to read out a few of the messages that were coming up as he set up his television. And with a few simple kind of, sentences, I was able to help out with that. Just a few minutes of my time, and it's just very, it's just a nice thing to be able to do. But remember, these are untrained volunteers, so there is definitely a security aspect to be aware of. You wouldn't want to ask them to help with logging into your online banking or giving any passwords or email addresses and that type of thing. So you do need to be aware of that. Now, in the last few years, I think in 2018, they then developed a system where you could put a video call in, but it would take you directly to trained assistants in particular companies. So Microsoft and Google, I think, were the first to join up. So if you're having IT problems, for instance, if you ring a volunteer, that volunteer may not be able to help. But if you do it through Microsoft, of course, you're going to get that dedicated assistance. The RNIB also have their calls directed through the app. Lloyd's Banking Group, which is useful because there you can actually discuss more sensitive information. And actually even the Clear Blue pregnancy test company have signed up, so they will help you interpret and to actually take your pregnancy test. The Aira version is available recently now, again in the UK. I think it started out in the US. It's also available in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And again, this is video call, but you are through to a trained agent. These are employees of Aira. And it's a subscription service, and it starts at £24 per month for 30 minutes of access. And then there are obviously different packages. So it's a bit different in the sense that you're going through to trained agents. They used to, I think when they started, they used to have a kind of like Google Glass type version as well, where the agent had access to a video link through a wearable thing like a pair of Google glasses. But now it seems that they've come back to the model of just using your mobile phone. Now, there are a couple of more apps to talk about are to do with orientation and mobility. Now, of course, just generic apps for these purposes like City Mapper and Google Maps can, of course, be of use. But there are additional applications that have been developed more with visual impairment in mind. So Microsoft have their application called Soundscape. And then there's another that's available. I think it was actually developed in Chile, and it's called Lazarillo. Lazarillo is available on both Apple and Android, and Soundscape is available only on Apple, but they're both free to download and to use. And these essentially give you sort of audio feedback or audio description to your journey. With Lazarillo, it's very much announcing street names, intersections, where bus stops are, and giving you approximate distances to where those are. Microsoft Soundscape is similar, except that it also has a feature where you can place an audio beacon somewhere that you are traveling to, and then whilst wearing headphones, it will give you audible beeps and clicks to help in either ear to help you direct and orientate yourself. There's another video here. I can show you that one as well. Just bear with me.
A busy city street. Maya with her guide dog.
Good boy, Steady. Steady, good boy.
Erin Lauritsen, Lighthouse, San Francisco.
We want to explore our world in the same ways that everybody else wants to explore their world.
Outdoor, donning a headset.
Soundscape fills in a lot of the mental map as you move. It makes it effortless and seamless to know what's around you because it's designed such that you can just put it in your pocket and go.
Maya using Soundscape, walking with Alex.
DSW Shoe Warehouse.
DSW Shoe Warehouse. Cool things happening around town here. When I'm with other people, I'm able to gather a lot of the same information my sighted friends or family are getting from the signage around me. And with that, I'm able to participate in, hey, look what's over there.
Desigual.
Oh, Desigual is showing up here as well, which is one of my favorite stores.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Those moments that don't usually happen for me in my life.
David, walking in the park.
Using the technology is relatively easy. You have to still concentrate on listening for obstacles, but you then get used to the chatter in the background and you can pick out suddenly something that's of interest to you.
Shona around town.
It was great. Tell me all the different shops as I passed, which is lovely. And the different street names as well. Quite often I don't know, which street's which.
Approaching intersection. Bar 3 goes right.
Maya, touching phone screen.
We have a beacon set for Nike store, 248 yards. The beacon has been helpful in approaching different addresses and places in busier areas.
Arm extended, pointing with her phone.
I'm getting the bell right about here.
Great. So let's just head off that way.
Okay. Forward.
Passing through an open market.
It's been a unique experience to work with the Soundscape team. They have been so transparent, forthcoming, open to feedback. It's been a really dynamic relationship. You have blind people on your team. You're working deeply with agencies like Lighthouse and reaching out and engaging with blind people in different places and from different backgrounds and really making sure that what's being created is aligned with the needs of the community.
Fiddler forward.
Nike store.
Good boy. Left and side.
Entering the store.
Woohoo! Okay. Hi, how are you today?
Logo of Guide Dogs UK. Logo of Lighthouse, San Francisco.
Right. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of a better feel for what that particular app might be able to do. So the last was to talk about these wearable electronic magnifiers that I do get asked about quite a lot now in clinic. So wearable electronic magnifiers, these sort of headset devices that magnify your surroundings, have actually been around since the 1990s, but the technology was a lot bulkier, heavier, clunkier then, and they really didn't take off very much at all. But now, because of the advent of smaller and lighter technology, these devices are potentially a bit more versatile and interest has kind of grown again. One thing to say is there is actually still limited clinical research in using these types of devices, but there are a few themes that have come out of the papers that have been published. One being that there is certainly significant improvement in clinical measures of vision. So what I mean by that is when you wear a device like this, you're essentially using, as we said before, a camera and a magnifying system. So if you read, say, a letter chart without the device, and then you put the device on, you manipulate the magnification, you can then make smaller letters on the chart larger, and so you will read further down that vision chart. Similarly, because it can have contrast settings and you can enhance the contrast, if you read a contrast chart, without the device, then you put the device on, you maximize the contrast settings, you'll now make lower contrast letters more contrasted, and you'll read more letters. So your measurements on these clinical tests will certainly go up whilst you wear the device. What we don't know completely is how well that translates into a real life improvement on real world tasks. And that's one of the messages in the papers has been that we need to test these out in a more real world way. Then there's also the question of their acceptance. So in one of the studies, it mentioned that only about half of those people who tried the technology were acceptable or open to the idea of using it in their day-to-day life. Another thing just to kind of bear in mind. Now, you might say, why are you talking about the clinical research for this type of technology? Well, you didn't really mention it for any of the apps. And I guess that's because these technologies can be very expensive. And I think it's, downloading an app and trying it out and deciding that it's for you or deciding that it's not for you, that's fine. And there's personal preference involved. With this, it's just, I hate the thought of people going out and spending thousands and thousands and then finding out that actually it's not the answer that they wanted. So it's more just to be kind of a bit pragmatic about it. So essentially these technologies have a few sort of, common features. As I mentioned, they're a headset and they've got this externally mounted camera that is imaging the world in front. And then it will have some either screen or screens that are housed within this headset that are positioned close to the eyes. And the wearer will view the image through the camera on these screens positioned quite close. And that allows you to create quite a lot of magnification. The magnification can then be adjusted. The contrast can be adjusted. The focus can be adjusted. And it will either be done using a controller in your hand, or in some of the newer devices, you can link it up to an app to control it, or it can have the controls on the device itself. And then also they have this image processing built in, so it can pick out edges, it can increase contrast, it can be used in low light. And some of the newer devices have integrated artificial intelligence to kind of recognize the task that's being done and maximize the viewing conditions for that task. So they really do have a lot of interesting features. There's two main types overall that's the way I see it. There are devices that use commercially available tech that's already out there. And usually this comes from the virtual reality world. So they would use virtual reality headsets with the addition of a smartphone, often a Samsung phone, that is held within the headset. And then the camera of the phone and the screen of the phone are the components that you're using to create the magnification. These tend to be a little bit less expensive because they're using this already commercially available technology, but they are a bit more bulky. And they're not really, they're not useful for anything that's a non-stationary task because it blocks out the peripheral vision whilst you're using the device. So for something stationary, like being sat down watching television, of course, that would be fine. But if you wanted to get up and walk around, you would most definitely have to take the device off again. Some of the other devices have these, they don't have a specific big headset like this. They've got a sleeker device with these screens fully integrated within the device. These tend to be a bit more expensive, but arguably are potentially a little bit more sleek. Though you'll still see that some people will find that cosmetically they're not yet, at that acceptable level. And these, the one that I'm showing here, an eSight. This is, I think, the fourth model of this eSight device that is available, and it doesn't block peripheral vision in the same sense because it utilizes what they call a bioptic tilt. So it allows you to tilt the headset or the camera so that it's pointing slightly above your eye level, so that when it's there, you can walk around. You don't need to look through the device. You can use your native vision. And then if you want to use the device, it's just a matter of simply tipping your chin in so that you can now look through the device and utilize that magnification on the go. I've also mentioned here that Oxite, which is a British company, are releasing an updated new device called the Onyx, and it's coming out later on in the year. So we'll keep a little eye and see how that one is also. But overall, what I would say is do try to try any of these devices before you want to go ahead and buy them. I think what's useful when you look at all the different company websites for these devices, they are very keen to set up these trials. So I really, if anyone is interested in that, I would definitely advise doing that trial and trying to do it at home if you can. Try to see how well any benefits clinically would translate into your sort of functional vision and how you function on a day-to-day basis. And also it's worth thinking, are there any alternative solutions that you can get through just generic devices that you either already have or that might be able to be purchased more cheaply? So these are all the topics that I wanted to cover in terms of the technology, but I thought it might also be worth just very briefly talking about accessing funding for some of this technology. Apologies to the people who are outside of the UK, because a lot of what I'm going to say now is quite specific to the United Kingdom, but I would encourage you to look for similar avenues in your own home countries. So in the UK, it's probably worth saying that in education and in employment, employers or teachers, schools, they have a legal responsibility to make what's called reasonable adaptations for anyone who has a disability. And by reasonable adaptation, that could mean, for instance, a child in school might need access to larger print materials. An employee in an office who uses their accessibility features might need a bigger screen so that they can utilize the magnification better. And these would be deemed reasonable adaptations, and therefore employers or schools and colleges would be, should be supplying those. But outside of that, if there are modifications, adaptations, or technology that would be deemed more sophisticated, you can apply through more sort of government funded schemes. So in education, this would be applying for something called an educational healthcare plan. In employment, it's a process called Access to Work that is run through the Job Centre Plus. Now, in each of these, there's a lengthy assessment process. It's not just a question of saying, please, can I have an ORCAM? It has to be decided to be appropriate for that person to carry out their job, or that it's necessary for a child in education. But devices can be funded through these means. But don't take from what I'm saying that it's an easy route to go down. There's still a lot of work involved in getting funding through that, but it's definitely worth applying if you can. And then there are charities that offer grants for technology. I've listed a few of the websites here: Guide Dogs, RNIB, VICTA, Blind Veterans, and blind.org.uk. I would encourage you to have a look and see what the stipulations are for who can apply, because it varies from charity to charity. So for instance, Guide Dogs and VICTA have grants for children. The RNIB, I think, is children and adults. Blind Veterans, as the name suggests, is for veterans from the UK Armed Forces. And blind.org.uk is actually the British Wireless for the Blind Fund. So it's more looking at audio technology. And then another few just resources that could be helpful. So the RNIB, the Royal National Institute for the Blind, have a Technology for Life team who are excellent, and you can contact them by email and by phone. And essentially they're there to answer any questions about technology. They are often visually impaired people who are users of this technology. They do training, they do one-to-one work. I think during the pandemic, things obviously will probably work a little differently. It's probably more remote. The RNIB also have a technology podcast that comes out every Tuesday, which I tend to listen to and can kind of pinch some of their topics. And it's called Tech Talk, and I would encourage you to have a listen there if you're interested. And then AbilityNet is another charity in the UK, and they have an excellent website that is called My Computer My Way. And on this website, it lists out all the different accessibility options that you can employ on a range of different devices. It breaks it down by topic. So depending on what it is that you want to do, is it that you want to magnify? Is it that you want to make your computer talk? And then it breaks it down by platform and by device. And again, you can contact them by email and by phone. And I think that is my last slide. So I hope that's given you a sort of a good overview. I'm happy to take any questions that you have, and apologies for my clunky maneuvering of all the screens and the videos, but I hope it kind of illustrated the points of the slides better.
Thank you, Hannah.